Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Charles Werner with Drone Responders with our FAA conversation that we have each month. Today we have John Meehan, who is our regular facilitator. We have Michael O'Shea with Drone Responders and Colin Roche with the FAA. And our special guest today, who's going to talk about UTM, what that looks like, what it is, where we headed, and answer any and all of your questions, is Jessica Brightman. She's the manager for the implementation branch of the Advanced Aviation Technologies Office, and she is the branch which leads policy development and implementation of UAS technologies. Her team is currently working on unmanned aircraft systems, traffic management systems, implementation, and beyond visual line of sight rulemaking. All fun things. So we're going to get started with John Meehan. And John is going to be talking today about everything you need to know about TFRs with FIFA and the games. John.
All right, thank you. Shall we give the folks another minute, or are we ready to roll here?
We can give him one more minute if you like, and you can get ready
Okay,
with your presentation.
okay. Hi, everybody. I unfortunately I'm in an office where there's no camera, so you don't get to see my mug today. But hopefully you'll enjoy the content. We've gotten a lot of questions from public safety in the past week in particular, and obviously the questions are building to a fever pitch. And those of you who are soccer aficionados or football aficionados, you like the word pitch. That was on purpose. Um, so this information is, I need to preface this by it's still a little bit of a moving target in some respects, but we just want to give you an update on kind of where the latest is for public safety. And reason being is we've gotten a lot of questions about events that are going on in the official cities where there's actual games and teams are located. And then there's our other events going on in other locales throughout the country that are they're not quote unquote FIFA sanctioned. They're not official FIFA or World Cup events. They're fan fests that may be going on in other cities, but those are not the official ones. And there is a big difference between how the airspace and security is going on between what is an official or a sanctioned event and what is a unofficial or a non-sanctioned FIFA event. And so as you're as you're getting requests perhaps to provide some overwatch or some support, uh, the way you're going to get into that airspace really is going to depend a lot on what is the status of a sanctioned or official event going on or not. So check that out. We do have a web page that has more information about the FIFA World Cup. That link here below, I'll put it in the chat when I'm done presenting there in case you want to check it out. The security concerns and airspace protocols, they are evolving. And in fact, I don't even have 100% certainty right now as to what is the latest. So my word to you all is expect changes, and it's imperative that you check those NOTAMs every day and to see what, if anything, has changed. So just be aware. As I mentioned, for those FIFA, those that are sanctioned events or locations, there are TFRs associated with that. There may be some differences in what kind of TFR they are. So it's very important that you check those NOTAMs and understand that if it's a FIFA match, a real match, like I think Mexico and Greece are going to play here very soon, that is definitely a TFR where you're going to have to contact the Systems Operations Support Center to get access. The way to do all that, again, check the NOTAMs in your area. Those links down there will get you to the NOTAMs that you can search. You can search by the map using the bottom link, and you can search by your city or different areas with the higher link there. But when in doubt, call the flight service and ask what's the latest on the TFRs in your area, and there's the phone number to contact them. If it's a non-sanctioned event, for example, I got a call yesterday from a department in one of the outlying cities in California that they had a fan fest and they were asked to provide security for it, but that fan fest was not an official FIFA fan fest, so that did not have a TFR. So the normal airspace protocols apply for those areas that are not official. There's not a TFR associated with them. If it's not in controlled airspace, right? If it's Class G, you can go ahead and fly that mission because it's not an official or sanctioned one. It's not in a TFR. Just remember, you do have to comply with the flight rules. And if you have a non-emergency situation, let's say you want to fly in a zero grid, you're going to need to go through the normal protocols to get an airspace authorization to operate above that grid, not through the SOSC. And what we recommend in this particular short fuse situation is if you're operating under 107 and you need to go above the UAS FMs, use either Lance with further coordination or FAA drone zone. And then when you get that reference information, be sure to send an email to the UAS Support Center. There's the email address that you'll do that. Let them know who you are, why you're in there, why you're making that request, any reference information and basic details. And what they'll do is they will alert the applicable air traffic service center. There's 3 service centers spread throughout the country, Eastern, Central, and Western. And then they'll try to expedite that for you. Likewise, if you're operating under Part 91, you do that airspace authorization above the UAS FMs by caps. It's the same idea. Make that application in caps and then send the information to the UAS Support Center so that they can have the Air Traffic Service Center look for it, because there's a huge backlog of regular requests in there and you need to differentiate yourself. As always, if there's an emergency situation, even in those non-official, non-sanctioned locations, if there's an emergency there, then of course the SGI process is still in effect. You would call the Systems Operations Support Center and you would get an SGI emergency authorization or waiver. That's the phone number to call. You're also going to more than likely need to fill out that waiver form in there, and they'll get you going on your way. If you want more information, this is the usual webpage about the SGI process. I think most of the people on this webinar already know about that, but that's where that information resides. And that is all I've got to say. So back to you, Charles. Oh, I do have one more thing to say. I will send a copy of this to drone responders after this webinar, so you can have it.
Hey, John, even though it's a non-FIFA sponsored event, if they have crowds over 100,000, they could still get a TFR, or the FBI can still get a TFR if they consider there's a threat, right?
The normal process would still take place, but I have a feeling that if it's 100,000 people, they already are working on something like that, right? So that shouldn't be a pop-up, in my opinion. But yes,
No, I just
the
want to make the
normal
point they
process.
should check for TFRs anyway, just to be on the safe side.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, the exact wording seems to be a little bit of a moving target. So, and I apologize, I couldn't get you all specific information. So check the NOTAMs every day, and when in doubt, call the Flight Service Center and ask them for that. There's a lot of information running around out there. So, and I know DHS is doing some outreach, our league folks are doing outreach. At the sanctioned events, there will be some federal presence. So do not be that person who is operating in those TFRs without an authorization. Will not end well.
So the key here is expect change, always check each time you're getting ready to
Yes.
fly to make sure that you're
Yes.
flying appropriately.
Yes, definitely.
And with that, we're going to switch gears. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll go through and catch those. Next up is Jessica Brightman, as I introduced earlier, and she is here to talk about the fast-moving world of UTM. We, as drone responders, have had conversations with service delivery companies, and as many of you know, when you have drones first responder programs and delivery programs operating in the same area, there's a good chance that there's a need for deconfliction. So we're all trying to figure out what this looks like, and as Part 108 is somewhere in the near future, we will have more automation, and it'll be important for us to get our heads wrapped around this. So Jessica, give us the UTM 101.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And I appreciate the time everyone is spending today to listen and join in the conversation. All right, so I am going to pull the slides up. Please let me know if folks can see those. Are we good?
It is now up.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to talk about a few things. I'll skip right to the first slide that has real stuff on it. So UTM, it's been a concept that's been out there for a while, started by NASA, and there's several different concepts of operations published by both NASA and the FAA. At FAA in the United States, the way we are deploying UAS traffic management is as a community-based cooperative system, what we refer to as a federated system. And what that means is it's not run by the federal government, even though the word is close. What it means is that there's multiple providers from multiple organizations. They can be companies, they can be other nonprofit entities, they could be states, they could be other government agencies that deploy services in the airspace specifically to mitigate risks for particular operations that are beyond visual line of sight. FAA's job is to oversee this, and the industry's job and the community's job is to deploy the services and utilize them as safety mitigations. And what I mean by that is that each service should directly mitigate a safety risk that's created by the operation. For example, if you're flying beyond visual line of sight, some of these services provide mitigations for the risk of collision with other types of aircraft out there that you can't see because it's beyond your visual line of sight. Now, all of these services are regulated and overseen by the FAA, and they're all based on industry consensus standards. And the majority of them are deployed in airspace below 400 feet or below 400 feet and below, where air traffic services are not currently offered. So who provides what here? Right now, the way it works is FAA provides a regulatory construct with what we call the near-term approval process. In the future, as both John and Charles were mentioning, there's a rule coming out. And that rule will then, part of that rule is a new part in the Code of Federal Regulations called Part 146. And that will be overseeing these entities. We provide oversight, which includes audits, fairness and equity to the airspace, approvals, review and certification of these service providers and the services that they will be offering to the operators. What we provide, ANSP or the Air Navigation Service Provider, the FAA, we provide information on restricted airspace, LANC grids, other charting information, and those can be incorporated into the services, but they're provided by the FAA and they can be either obtained directly from the FAA or via a service. Now, what does the industry do? The industry creates the services. The USSs, those are UAS service suppliers, or UTM services that are interoperable. DSSs, those are discovery and synchronization services that allow these services to talk to each other on the back end. They provide communications links. ADSP is a term you might see that stands for Automated Data Service Providers. Those are UTM services, including weather, surveillance, and deconfliction services. Now, the one thing that's A little different than traditional air traffic is as I mentioned before, each of these services provide a safety mitigation for an operational risk. So industry and service providers need to determine what risks exist out there, create standards and services to meet those risks, and then optimize the business case for it to work and for people to need those services. So speaking of which, let's talk about what kinds of services are, and I'll explain how they work together and what each one is. So these are the services we know of today. And I will discuss which risk for each service as well. There could be different services in the future that are not listed on this slide that could come up and could be created and provide additional safety and security to the airspace. But this is what we're working on right now. Strategic deconfliction, that's the main UTM service deployed in the United States airspace today. This service is intended to address drone-to-drone collision risk, and the way it does so is before flight, each operator submits what we call flight intent. Think of a flight intent like a traditional flight plan. What it is a flight intent is when you're taking off, where you're going to fly, as in the route, and what altitude you're going to fly at. Then what happens with that flight intent is the system creates these sort of paths through the sky, like you see in the image in the lower right-hand corner of this slide. I think of them like Tetris blocks or Legos. Each one is approximately 5 seconds long, as in the duration where you'll be there. And the system deconflicts 3 blocks at a time. The one you are currently in, the one you just left, and the one you are going into. So when you put your flight intents in and another operator puts their flight intents into their service provider, once all these paths through the sky are created, the service providers compare them and determine whether or not there are conflicts. If there are no conflicts, it's great. Everybody's given a green light to go. They're considered accepted flight intents, which means they are allowed to take off at the time they have said that they would take off. If there's a conflict, what happens is one of most cases on a first come, first served basis, the first person would get an accepted state, and the second operator would be told that they need to deconflict and reroute. They could reroute by time, they could reroute by route, where they're going to fly. Maybe instead of straight to their destination, they take a sort of a circular route or a triangular or square route. Or they could reroute by altitude. And once that is rerouted, they're given an accepted state and allowed to fly through that flight and know that they will be deconflicted from the other aircraft participating in the system. Now, up until the end of April this year, these services were all on a first come, first served basis. And in the past year, we have added prioritization to these services. And the way that works is currently a two-phase or two-level prioritization scheme. There is the standard level of prioritization, which is the standard operations that could be muffin deliveries, it could be a training mission, it could be an infrastructure inspection for a standard routine inspection, or anything, real estate pictures, whatever it might be. Then we have a level of prioritization that means that mission is critical to the safety or health of human beings. And that would be a higher prioritization. So if 2 flights were in conflict in their pre-flight planning, the one that has the higher priority that is important for the safety and health of humans would get priority, and the other flight, whether or not they submitted before or after, would be told that they had to reroute. The prioritization is very new for us, and I'm looking forward to seeing the data and how it works, but this is how this system works. Now, so this is all pre-flight, as I said. You put your flight intents in, and they get with the green light or, asked to reroute prior to departure. If you're prioritized, you get to bump other people. Now, one thing to note is I said pre-flight, but a lot of these intents can be put in, very soon before, or with not a whole lot of time before you depart. So if, say, you find out you have a flight that you need to launch a drone out of a certain location, and you need to launch it within the next, 4 or 5 minutes, you can put that intent in the system, and in a couple, the approvals or the reviews for deconfliction come back within seconds. So this is not something where you have to plan hours in advance. Yes, it is pre-flight, but it is something where you're getting responses within seconds. So it is definitely, not a time-consuming method. Now, that's strategic deconfliction. The next service is conformance monitoring for situational awareness. This is a service that we're currently building out. Strategic deconfliction is live in the airspace right now. I'm going to show you a map later about where it is actually being used, but it is live and approved to be used anywhere in the United States at this point in time. Conformance monitoring for situational awareness is the next thing on our roadmap that we're working to deploy. And what conformance monitoring for situational awareness does, this is an in-flight service. And once you've gotten your pre-flight intent approved, once you have been deconflicted with other aircraft, you take off. And conformance monitoring for situational awareness monitors the location of your drone within or in relation to the proposed intents you have there is it staying within the Tetris or Lego blocks airspace? And is it or is it not? And as long as it's staying within its flight intent, the conformance monitoring for situational awareness, often referred to as CMSA, just monitors your flight and all is good. Now, if you have an issue where you need to deviate or your aircraft deviates because of a control malfunction or maybe higher than expected winds or something, if it goes outside of its boundaries of the flight intents, those tubes or paths through the sky that you see in the picture, two things can happen. The first scenario is your aircraft is considered contingent. What that means is it's just barely outside of the boundaries of your path through the sky there, or we refer to them as volumes of airspace, or the Tetris blocks. If it is just outside and it's maneuvering to come back into the airspace, it's considered contingent. If it is outside of its intended path, outside of its path through the sky, and has maybe some kind of control malfunction, maybe it needed to go somewhere else for another reason, whatever, it is not going to be able to return to its intended path. That's what we call off-nominal. In both cases, what this service does is it provides information to the other drones operating in the area that there is an aircraft that is outside of its intended route and could potentially cause a hazard to other aircraft. It does not necessarily tell the other operators what to do. It just informs them that there's an aircraft that's not where it's supposed to be. It could also send these alerts to the FAA as well. So that is how we are monitoring and working on deconflicting drone-to-drone collision risk. Both of these services, their whole goal is to address drone-to-drone collision risk and assure that we do all the drones in the airspace are operating in different areas and are not presenting a hazard to each other. The next type of service is a surveillance service. We currently have 2 of these deployed in the United States, one in North Dakota and one in New York State. I know there's several other areas in the country where they're working to deploy them, and my team is working to give them authorization and acceptance to be used. Surveillance services provide a picture via input from radars, ADS-B sensors, and other types of sensors that show the location of mostly traditional aircraft, but in some cases, if they have remote ID in, they could also show some unmanned aircraft, but mostly traditional aircraft. And these services are intended to provide situational awareness for the operators to address the drone to traditional aircraft collision risk. And they just show where the other aircraft are and allow the operators to maneuver around them and assure that they are not creating a hazard by getting too close to those other aircraft. The next service is a command and control link. There are several services there's one service that's deployed in North Dakota, and there's some other services that are currently in review to provide control links for unmanned aircraft in certain areas. And then the last type of service, we don't have one deployed in the United States yet, but we have one under review, and that is a weather service that provides micro weather for drone operators in areas so that, they can understand the localized weather, not just the weather at, say, the airport, 20 miles away that is not, what am I trying to say? That's not right nearby. So I think especially because smaller aircraft weather can be very impactful on the flight. So I want to talk a little bit more about strategic deconfliction because this is the most common service right now, and I think it is the one that provides the largest safety benefit for us, given the nascent part of this industry and the great expansion in BVLOS operations and drone operations in general across the country. So, as I mentioned before, all services are based on industry standards. So for strategic deconfliction, we are utilizing in the United States the ASTM F3548-21 standard. That is also called the UTM interoperability standard. You don't need to know the numbers, but what it does is, this provides the strategic deconfliction. So just some terms for you to use. You'll hear flight intent or operational intent. That is what you put into the system to be deconflicted through the other aircraft in the area. You'll also hear either strategic deconfliction or strategic coordination. And what that is the ability to deconflict the aircraft. It is the thing that I talked about on the previous slide, where the system creates your flight intent, makes a path through the sky, and deconflicts it with the other paths of the other aircraft, the other drones that are operating in the area. The last thing I mentioned earlier was the discovery and synchronization service. What this is this is the back end, and this is how the different service providers, in the case right now here in the United States, there's 10 accepted, FAA accepted strategic deconfliction services, and they all communicate through one discovery and synchronization service, which is a back-end computer system that allows them to share information and deconflict flights anywhere in the country. This is something that's very important as operations expand into more regions because it allows for deconfliction seamlessly across the entire United States. I think this is definitely something that, folks who have understood traditional aircraft for a long time, having seamless borders and the ability to operate between different regions, between different areas with a single system that allows the deconfliction is definitely a strong way to create a safer, more efficient airspace in the long term. Okay, so this is the strategic deconfliction for dummies slide, and the one that I like personally because it very clearly just defines what it is. So strategic deconfliction, sharing operational intents pre-flight before you take off, first come, first serve unless you have a higher priority. And as I said before, the higher priority is based on when the mission is impactful, could impact the health or safety of humans. And one thing to note that I did not mention before, when we talk about prioritization, and you'll notice I've used the word mission. The reason I use the word mission is we do this on a flight by flight basis, not by operator. So for example, if you are a public safety department and you have a mission where you're supporting officers in the field and it's a life-threatening situation, that is a high priority mission. If you are a public safety operator and you're doing a training mission, that would not be considered a high priority mission. However, if you're say you're a package delivery company and you're delivering muffins, not a high priority mission. If you're a package delivery company and you're delivering, say, blood, time-sensitive medication, or organs, then you're a high priority operation. So it is definitely based on what that operation is doing and how that operation impacts health and safety of humans. The four-dimensional volumes are the flight intents that I talked about, like Legos or Tetris through the sky. They are in the volumes that are based on your altitude, the altitude, location, route of flight, and time that you will be traversing the airspace. It does not have detect and avoid capabilities. It is not positive control by air traffic. It is a collaborative deconfliction mechanism between aircraft using technology. It does not separate aircraft drones from other traditional aircraft, such as traditional manned aircraft. And right now it is pre-flight only, but once we get conformance monitoring for situational awareness up, there will be an aspect that's during flight. And right now we're limiting it to below 400 feet for small drones. Now, again, looking back at that picture. So, just a quick review. Every operator puts in their flight intent, and the system creates the Legos through the sky, those 4D volumes. Then each USS or UAS service supplier, the UTM service, checks for conflicts. If everything's good, it searches the DSS in the geographical area where that person wants to operate, deconflicts with other flights in that geographical area. And then if no conflicts are detected, it reserves that airspace for that aircraft during that time and space. If there are ones, as I said before, if the flight requesting to fly is higher priority, it would bump the one that's previously had the airspace reserved. If it is the same priority, it would be requiring the second flight to deconflict. Now, how do we approve these things? So, as I mentioned before, FAA is providing regulatory oversight for this. So right now, we are doing that through what's called the near-term approval process. This is a process we've been doing for several years. We started it when Congress asked us to in 2018 in the Reauthorization Act of 2018. And we created this process where Congress said, FAA, please find a way to allow the use or authorization of these services to mitigate risks for BVLOS flights prior to rulemaking. And then we created this process and launched it about 3 years ago. What the process does is it requires a UTM service provider to come to us with an operator. We call that the champion operator. We review the service. We check the safety value of the service. We look at the documentation, which include the concept of use, which is similar to a concept of operations, but it is what the service provider says is these are the parameters for operators to use this service. We assure that that service is meeting and built to an industry consensus standard. If it is an interoperable service, we check that it is interoperable. To do this, we have software testing tools that the industry uses to assure that their interoperability works. We then work with the service provider to get to the point where we feel that their service is safe and provides a safety value and mitigates a risk. At the same time, our flight standards colleagues review the operator's operations, and then together, when everyone's ready, we issue a waiver or exemption to the operator, and we issue what's called a letter of acceptance to the service provider. Once the service provider has a letter of acceptance, they can utilize that letter of acceptance for other operators in similar CONOPS to use the same service in a variety of different areas. In most cases, it is any area across the country. If the system is, say, a surveillance system that's based on ground radars or ADS-B sensors, they would need additional approvals if it's in a new area. But we utilize that to allow them to expand and have multiple operators use their service. So you may have heard talk about either the key site or the operational evaluation. We initially started in North Texas with this. This is the first place we deployed UTM services and particularly strategic deconfliction services. The idea was to create go find a place where we had overlapping BVLOS operations and utilize a risk-based approach to validate UTM services as a risk mitigator for BVLOS. We started in North Texas and we've expanded since then. We wanted to make sure that we had a way to operationalize these services and test them in the real world for operations that are happening in an organic manner. Prior to that, we had done several UTM field tests where we go out to a location, we turn them on for 6 hours and we test them. But this is the first time we deployed them real world, and this operational evaluation is ongoing and expanding throughout the NAS. It started in late 2023 and we are almost 3 years into it, and we've got a large area of the United States and quite a bit of progress. So this system, this operational evaluation, it's an ecosystem where we have multiple networked service suppliers, UTM service suppliers or USSs, using strategic deconfliction for now or strategic coordination, and we're working on conformance monitoring for the future. We're validating the interoperability standard. We're working through a governance model to allow this to work collaboratively and to continue to build and learn from the ecosystem. And we're utilizing that near-term approval process to grant letters of acceptance to each of the service providers that are participating. So the benefits that we found from this project is we have been able to streamline the near-term approval process to accept strategic deconfliction services. We've had a strong collaboration between operators, service providers, and the FAA, as well as NASA, to help us build this ecosystem, learn over time, and improve and iterate and continue to expand the safety value that it gives. We've created an ecosystem where UTM services can be deployed anywhere in the country. We started in North Texas with the first, as I said, the whole project started in 2023, but the first actual flights that were deconflicted were on June 25th, 2024. And now we have services deployed in Texas, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, New York State, North Carolina, Kansas, Ohio. I think that's all. Yeah. And we have a couple states coming out soon to be added. Let's see. Yep. There we go. Here we go. Okay. So now this is my favorite slide. This is the one where it kind of, we start to see how this is expanding across the United States and how folks can participate and learn more. We have currently, this is where UTM is right now, either actively deployed or being built out to be deployed. So the two green diamonds in North Dakota and Syracuse are surveillance systems. Those are systems that utilize radar and ADS-BN to provide a situational awareness picture for the location of traditional aircraft to address drone-to-drone collision risk. All the green rectangles are areas where strategic deconfliction is currently being deployed and used to actively deconflict aircraft and assure that we address and mitigate the risk for drone-to-drone collision risks. The yellow rectangles are where other services are currently being worked on and being reviewed by my team for deployment. Those include a surveillance service in Virginia and a surveillance service in San Diego, as well as a surveillance service in Tulsa and strategic deconfliction services in Northern California, Tulsa, more in Arkansas and New York State. Ohio actually should be green now. I missed that. That one's green now, just recently. We have more coming in North Carolina and across the country. So we're continuing to build this ecosystem, iterate every day, and build the areas that we support these operations out across the country. And that comes to the point where I have questions. So I'd love to hear what folks have for questions and be able to, I can take the slides down too, and be able to talk more about what folks have for questions. I'm happy to answer any of them.
And I will start.
Excellent.
So I see, and this is still evolving. So we're still learning and there can be adjustments. But let's use drones as first responder as an example. The mission, as you said, can be approved within seconds, so there doesn't seem to be like there'll be a delay at that point. We're not going to a point and back.
Yep.
We're going to a point and then operating in a tactical mode, which will be totally different than other stuff. How does that work?
The flight intents that are put in are entered into the system by latitude, longitude, altitude, and time. And the ones that I showed on the picture, and this is actually good feedback, Charles, is I should probably add a picture for one that isn't a straight line. There's nothing that says the system can't take any, the system is math, right? So it can take a box. So you could put a flight intent in that is, say, a rectangle up to 200 feet. That's maybe half a mile wide and 2 miles long. that you're going to be there for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it might be. So, well, the intents can be out and back. They can also be any other shape that you want to make.
Well, let's use for example, we get to a scene we're operating, and you said that we can box that in, so that would create an area of deconfliction. But then it changes without warning into a chase that we're now in. We're immediately going without changing and going outside the box. How do we deal with that?
That's a good question, and that's something that I think we need to work on a little bit, but there's a couple ways we can do it. Right now, within the ecosystem, we can connect the two operators together so that they can contact each other and they can work it out. We cannot, at this point, editing flight intents en route is not something that the system is able to do, but it is something we'd like to work towards. And one thing I would say that would be very helpful to us is the more folks we have like you involved in the conversations, the better we can understand it. So I can promise it's something we're working on, but I definitely need feedback from you and your members to help to understand how that would occur and how it would be best for them to input that into the system as we build out those capabilities.
And I just want to let people know that we as drone responders have entered into a conversation and collaboration with the service delivery cohorts, which are really driving a lot of this moving forward. They're the ones that have the most interest. And of course, we have the most interest from DFR and service delivery so that we actually deconflict each other and don't crash in the process. Let me ask the question, because I haven't seen any questions pop up yet, but on like smaller operators that are operating out there, like even public safety operations that aren't DFR could be operating beyond visual line of sight for up to a mile or something. I'm trying to figure out in my mind, I've got on the scene tactically as a public safety official responder, and now I'm putting my drone up and I'm just an individual that's, doing that. I guess there would be some type of automated entry system to go into.
There's a couple different ways. First of all, each service provider has built their system slightly differently. How you put it in. There are user interfaces for each service supplier. Right now, as I mentioned before, we currently have 10 UTM strategic deconfliction services approved for use in the United States. Each one has their software slightly different. Now, one thing I can say is that some of those service providers either are working with some of the platforms that are being utilized by public safety or are in conversations to work with them. These services could easily be implemented into platforms like DroneSense. They could be implemented into platforms, some of those other systems that you're already using via API. So if you're putting your flight into, say, your DroneSense or other fleet management portal, these services could collaborate with those platforms and provide it would happen automatically for you within those portals.
Currently, a lot of people are operating without using drones since they're tactically operating in the field. They're not operating necessarily with any system. So and I know we just have to work through these processes to figure it out.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And a lot of things are going to be spelled out with Part 108 as well as what some of this looks like. You want to give us any tips or any head starts on? I know.
The rulemaking joke. Well, first, let me say that, when it comes to the tactical, you could subscribe to a UTM service. And, there's a lot of them out there. If folks have questions about where to contact them, I'm more than happy to have folks reach out to me or my team, and we can introduce you to some service providers. I'm going to put a link in the chat, which is my team's group mailbox, which is aus-utm@faa.gov. So if you send an email to that, it comes to all the folks that are working on UTM on my team. And we can help you, know who are the service providers to contact. There's several service providers that are working with UTM, with public safety already. Several of them have, a couple different ways of working with different types of operators. So I definitely think that, contact us. We can get you in touch with the right people. When it comes to 108, for those of you who, I can definitely talk about what the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking said. And in the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, if you are operating under 108, And for those of you who are not aware, there is a permit category under 108 that allows for public safety to operate under that regulation should they choose. As you know, you could operate as a public aircraft operator, you could operate as under 107, or there's the opportunity to operate under 108 under what's called a civic interest permit. And under these permits, if you're operating under 108, you're required to utilize strategic deconfliction and or conformance monitoring in certain areas, such as controlled airspace or overpopulation, highly dense, areas of population. So if that is true, then you would utilize an FAA approved service. The thing that I think that is important to know is that this rule was out for public comment last year. We got a lot of comments from all of you. We got a lot of comments from a lot of other people. We spent several months considering and reading those comments, and we have made adjustments to that initial rule. So just for you to know, when it comes out as a final rule, there will be changes that I think will help your community. But when that comes out, I can't talk to what the specific changes are, or when it's coming out. All I know is that it's well above my head in the food chain. And I've been, working hard, and my team's been working hard to respond to our leadership and help get this to the Office of Management and Budget to be published as a final rule. Looks like we have some questions.
Just to comment on the question, Aviation UTM demonstrated dynamic route modifications during public safety vehicle pursuit, car chase, and use case with multiple public safety agencies participating in a live flight demonstration in Fort Worth.
Yep, that is true. And that is something that, as I mentioned, it is possible within the system. It's not the version that is deployed right now, but it is something we definitely want to work towards building into the system. So, like Stas said, that's something that we have demonstrated, but is not currently deployed live yet. And I would definitely encourage folks who are interested in being part of the conversation. They can contact folks like Stas, they can contact folks like me, and I can help them understand how they can participate and how they can join in and be part of the conversation, as well as utilize services for their operations if they'd like to.
And Drone Responders has an AAM working group, which we work with NASA and FAA, and then we have public safety agencies on as well. So if you're interested in doing that, I'm going to put my email in the chat box.
There's a couple questions and I see I'm going to answer these live. One, and then John, I see your hand raised. Will these systems look at LANC approvals as they pop up? No. The LANC approvals the LANC authorizations are authorizations to enter controlled airspace. They are different than the strategic conflict detection because they allow multiple aircraft into each LANC grid. Are BVLOS flights visible to VLOS pilots on the dashboard? No, there is no dashboard within UTM that shows like live tracking of aircraft. This is a distributed system where each service provider takes the flight intents from their operators and then deconflicts them. Then each service provider, through once conformance monitoring for situational awareness is live, will monitor their operators' flights for non-conformance. But there is no centralized picture where all these aircraft are shown live in the sky. John.
I think it'd be good for the community to understand a little bit of the conversation we had earlier about the requirement for those of you who have waivers from us. You have a waiver if you're operating under Part 107, or you have a waiver, your CAWA under 91-113. We don't waive, and this is important, really, it's a kind of a public service announcement here, but for those of you who have those, just realize we do not waive 107-37 or 91-111, which is don't be a collision hazard with another aircraft. And guess what? Other drones are aircraft, right? So here's my question to you, Jess. Can you give a brief overview of how many UAS Part 135 flights are occurring in what particular cities. And if you're in those cities, I recommend you consider the benefits of going into this UTM system to know where they are, to be one more mitigation to reduce your exposure to that. So maybe you could comment about that. Long-winded, I'm
Definitely.
sorry.
Yeah, no worries, but definitely. And it's a really good point because, you know, John's been working on drone integration a little longer than me, but I've been working on it now for 8 years. And I remember early on, there was one package delivery. We'd have one or two, we'd have a handful of flights every month inspecting railways, one or two police departments across the United States using drones, couple 100,000 drones registered, things like that. The use of drones has exploded across the country. And in the last year in particular, watching the numbers increase has been, for me, very exciting, having worked on it for so long, but also impressive to watch. And especially when you consider it in comparison to other numbers. We have over a million, over a million drones registered versus only, a few 100,000 traditional aircraft. And since the beginning of 2026 in January through the end of April, we've had over 600,000 flights utilizing UTM that were deconflicted for package delivery across the country. And those flights have occurred mainly in the North Texas, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida areas, also Arkansas, but a few other areas. So I think it's 660,000 something. And that's a number that's up from, a few weeks ago, I was saying it was about 500,000. Every month it continues to climb. At this point, we may hit close to 1 million flights in the first half of this calendar year. And if you think back, thinking back, a couple years ago, we didn't have any. Or we'd have one or two or a handful, like 50 package delivery, and they were all visual line of sight or using visual observers. Now they're not using visual observers. They're using this cooperative UTM ecosystem to assure that they are deconflicted and don't collide. So there's a lot out there. And when you think about, what in aviation safety culture, we often talk about the big sky theory and how that's not enough to keep aircraft safe and keep them apart. Yes, there's a vast amount of space out there, and it seems like, there's aircraft are definitely, there's plenty of room for everyone to fly around. Yes, but the risk of collision is still there, and the consequences of that are still very important to consider and to assure the safety of people on the ground. So finding utilizing these types of mitigations, because there are so many aircraft up there delivering packages from, things like muffins to things like blood and medicine to individuals across this country. It's important to, increase the mitigations to make sure you're flying safely so that you can also be supporting your operations. That's the other thing. It's really important that your aircraft is separate. If you're beyond visual line of sight, that you're utilizing as many mitigations as you can to assure that that aircraft is safe so it can successfully complete its mission and support your overall organization and objectives. Does that cover it, John?
Yeah. And how would one of these entities that is in those cities, how would they get involved with this if they wanted to?
Definitely. You can email my team. The other option is there's a GitHub site which the industry has put together where you could send an email, go on, and there's a link about how to participate. I just put that link. Oh, did I just put these? You know what? I just made a mistake. I'm realizing I need to put this to everybody. Here's to everybody. And I sent the email only to the hosts too. Sorry about that. Technology fail on my part. There you go. There's the email and the link to the industry GitHub site. I would also encourage you to speak to folks like Stas, there's his company, Aviation. Other companies out there that work strongly with public safety are Airspace Link and Onra Technologies, but there are others, and I'm happy to introduce you to any of them. Just send my team a note.
Yeah, and I would say join the AAM working group that
Yes.
we have because we're discussing all these things. And as I mentioned, Drone Responders is working directly with the cohorts so that we can start bringing this collective conversation in to a broader scale. Because I think in Richmond, Virginia, we got the notice from Amazon that, hey, we're going to be delivering on July 6th. Well, their answer was you need to get on UTM. Well, there's no information that I know of that's been provided to public safety prior to this of saying, here's something you need to be thinking about. And I'm guessing that you all, as the FAA, require these delivery companies to inform the stakeholders in those areas that they're going to be doing deliveries first and doing presentations
Yes.
as
Well,
such.
just like everyone's, John said before, everyone's waivers, everyone's exemptions, everyone's authorizations from the FAA say that you're supposed to work with the other operators in the area to assure that you're addressing collision risk and you letting them know you're operating. So yes, they're supposed to do that. And I also, the GitHub link that I just posted is to the cohort that's provided by the cohort that Charles is talking about. And I know it looks like Ian's been very, very patient.
Yeah, Ian, I'm going to allow you to talk, so go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Hello, Ian.
Let me see if I can unmute him. I think I wish.
You can always type your question in, Ian, and we'll type it into the Q&A pod and we can get to it.
Yeah, I don't see him unmuting, so I don't know what else to do here.
Yeah, I tried to do that, but it said, send the message to him to ask to unmute, but I don't know if he was able to get that.
So I'm not sure if he can't hear us or what, but you can still put the question in the question and answer if you can't seem to get one for whatever reason. So one of the things that when talking to the cohort that was kind of confusing to me is that when we were talking, Anra made the point of saying, we still can't see each other. We haven't come up with how we're sharing our information. So I'm trying to understand how that deconfliction actually takes place if they can't see each other's information.
The way it works is let's say we'll use you, me, Mike, and John as the example. You and I are operators. John and Mike are service suppliers. John's my service supplier since he's FAA. Mike's your service supplier. And the way it works is you put your operational intents into Mike's service. I put my operational intents into John's service and say, you put yours in first. Mike's service asks the ecosystem, is anybody else flying? No, you're good to go. Then I come to John. I'm like, hey, I want to fly this flight during this time. And then his system takes the latitude and longitude and pings Mike's system and says, here's this flight. Do you have anything that conflicts with any of the route? Yes or no. If it's yes, then it comes back to me with where it conflicted, and I must deconflict that. Say they crossed at the same altitude 3 minutes into my flight. Then I either plan to climb higher for the first 3 minutes, perhaps to fly over where you're flying, or I wait a minute or two till you pass, and then I take off and go. And that's how the systems deconflict. It's not by seeing things on the screen. It's about computer math in the sky. I want to say magic, but that's probably not the right word to use as an FAA person, but it's computer math in the sky.
Yeah, and in talking to Peter, he was explaining that this hasn't been figured out yet, but the goal is, as you mentioned, to be looking at those grids before and after when you're flying, and slowly that path that you've set clears up behind you and continues to do that as you progress through your mission to finalize it. So it clears the airspace as you're kind of making your pathway through. That's what.
Yeah. This person typed in, is UTM required under current waivers to comply, or is it just a bonus to add to the safety plan? It is a means to address drone-to-drone collision risk. So I can't.
I'll comment on it because we write the waivers. The answer is it is not required. However, you are required to be vigilant at all times to not be a collision hazard to others. So really, it's one more tool in your toolkit to help you comply with 91.111. We do not waive 91.111.
Correct.
Nor 107.37.
And keep your eye on
Yeah,
Part 108 as it comes out, because that could dictate some different things as to what you have to do and what you don't have to do.
Yeah, and what I was also going to say was that, everybody needs to come up with their own safety plan to mitigate the risks that are out there, including the risks in 91, 111, 107, 37, and all the other risks that are there. So this can be a means and part of that safety plan to address it. But every situation is different, and I would suggest you work with your contacts in flight standards. Feel free to reach out to my team. We could help you address it. But like John said, it's a way to help mitigate that risk, and there's no magic button to everything. So you have to have a strong safety plan to address all the risks.
And there will be more information that comes as we progress and we learn more. And again, I don't see any more questions here. So I'd like to thank you, Jessica, for being online. Colin, thanks for being here in case we had any other questions, and being here on all the other events as well. Michael Shea, thanks for being here as well. And John, sorry we couldn't see this time, but we appreciate you as always being our facilitator each month. And so this will conclude today's episode. This will be recorded and put into the Drone Responders YouTube channel. And we look forward to seeing everybody next month, the second Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And maybe we'll have an update as things continue to progress. And Part 108 coming out by then? Oh, sorry. Had to make a joke. But anyway, thank you all for being here, and we will see you all next month.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to join.
Thank you.